Making this list honestly scared the life out of me. From a sacrifice of 900 people to performing insane illegal surgeries, I'm your host Makayla, and I'm going to talk about the top 10 scary cult practices from history. Starting off this countdown at number 10, Nexium. If you thought cults were a thing of the past, think again. Nexium had more than 18,000 followers across North America until 2017, when members came forward to expose the abusive practices of a secret society within the group. Women were recruited under the false pretense that they were joining a sisterhood of sorts, but it ended up being an intimacy cult. A pyramid scheme existed within the group, with the leader, who members called Vanguard, at the top, masters who recruited other women to the secretive group, and at the bottom were the newest recruits, who were referred to as the slaves. A former member recounted to the New York Times that in order to be admitted into the secret club, she had to give her master naked photos and other compromising documents that would be used as blackmail if she ever told anyone about the group's existence. In 2020, the leader was tried in court, where more than a dozen women came forward with statements regarding his psychological and intimate abuse. Victims were also as young as 15 years old. The leader was sentenced to life in prison, but in a court filing, his lawyers wrote he is not sorry for his conduct or his choices. Now coming in at number 9, Order of the Solar Temple. Founded in Switzerland in 1984 by Joseph D. Mambro, the Order of the Solar Temple traced its roots to the medieval Knights Templar, but also thought the world would end in the 1990s. Things took a turn in 1994 when Joseph reportedly ordered the execution of an infant in Quebec. Later that year, more than 50 members of the group were murdered or passed by taking their own life, and the group's buildings were destroyed by fire. Additional members then passed away by also taking their own lives in 1995 and 1997. Wildly enough, the Order of the Solar Temple still remains active today and has several hundred members. Number 8, Angel's Landing. Angel's Landing is the name of the 20-acre compound outside of Kansas, where Lou Castro and a small group of people lived an extravagant life in the early 2000s. Castro's followers were convinced that he was an angel and a seer who could look into the future and know when you were going to pass away. Local law enforcement took an active interest when a member of the Angel's Landing community tragically turned up deceased on the compound in 2003. When the member's husband passed in a freak accident in 2006, a local detective then dived into every bit of personal and financial information he could find on the people living at Angel's Landing. He found out that expensive life insurance policies were taken out on people in Castro's circle and cashed in by members when someone in the makeshift family accidentally passed away, and this pattern occurred around every 2.5 years. In 2010, Castro moved from Kansas to Tennessee and adopted a new identity, and he was soon arrested by the FBI for aggravated identity theft and fraudulent use of social security card number. He was later charged with 28 felonies, and in February 2015, he was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 80 years in prison. Number 7, Church of the Lamb of God. The Church of the Lamb of God was started by Hervé Lebaron in Mexico. Lebaron convinced his followers that he received direct instructions from God, which included using an abandoned Mormon doctrine, blood atonement, that allows the execution of sinners to cleanse them of evil. Lebaron had 51 children with 13 different wives and over 2 decades amassed hundreds of followers, who allegedly took the lives of more than 20 people on behalf of him and his orders. Mexico authorities then arrested him in 1979 and handed him over to the FBI, where he was charged and jailed for life in Utah. Number 6, Heaven's Gate. Founded by Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles in the 1970s, Heaven's Gate was a cult that had a complicated belief system involving aliens, spaceships, and an intimate recycling of the planet Earth. After Bonnie passed away in 1985, Applewhite took the group to even further extremes, and in 1997, he began claiming that the spacecraft would carry the Heaven's Gate members to the next level of existence. While living in a rented home in San Diego, Applewhite and his 38 followers passed by taking their own life by taking a pill used to treat and prevent the symptoms of seizures, sedation, hypnotics, and insomnia mixed with applesauce. They all wore the same uniform and Nike shoes and had $5.75 in their pockets. As of today, the Heaven's Gate website still exists and is maintained by 2 people of the group's followers. Halfway, number 5, Anon. Charles Dieterich opened the infamous Anon location in 1958. There were 3 phases to the cult over the course of its lifespan: a drug rehabilitation program, Utopia Society, and church. Hundreds of people then moved in and were charged a fee to live in the compound. People of all professions worked to give their money to the group. often doing a tremendous amount of physical labor. At one point, the cult had $33 million in assets. The rules of the cult then became stricter and the abuse became more rampant. He compiled an enemies list, which ultimately became a hit list. It included lawyer Paul Morantz, who wanted to help free families kept in the group and had won a $300,000 judgment against the group for abducting and brainwashing a member. This enraged the leader to the point that he ordered 2 of his Imperial Marines to take a venomous rattlesnake in Paul's mailbox the following month. He was then bitten and just barely survived. Police raided the cult and Charles was arrested in his Lake Havasu home on December 2nd, 1978. He was then sentenced to 5 years supervised probation, fined $5,000 and ordered to no longer run the cult. The group was then shut down forever due to its violence and tax fraud in 1991. Number 4, the Ant Hill Kids. Broach Theriault was said to have belonged to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, living a life with no unhealthy foods, drugs, or alcohol. He preached that the world would end on February 17, 1979, and formed the Ant Hill Kids. He gained a small but loyal following through his charisma and looks. While hiking, Roach, who went by Moses, claimed to have received a message from God, prompting him to start a wealthy living clinic in Quebec, so they could all be saved. He moved his followers to tents on a hill and made them build a town. He married his followers to each other to eventually void them, and later began being intimate with his followers. He then became a violent alcoholic and tortured his followers through drunken surgical procedures and cut off their limbs to prove he could heal them. He also forced members to break their legs with sledgehammers, shoot one another's shoulder, and eat their own feces. He was then convicted of criminal negligence and spent 2 years in prison after causing the passing of a 2-year-old with a failed surgery attempt. Number 3, the Manson family. Following his prison release, longtime criminal Charles Manson decided he would leave for San Francisco to form the Manson family. Manson fit in so well with the hippie scene in the city and fed women LSD, asking them to join him. He and his 5 female followers traveled to Los Angeles, and Manson supposedly predicted an Armageddon and told his followers they should stay with him to survive. Upon listening to the Beatles' White Album, Manson felt as though the band was speaking directly to him and warning him of a race war, helter skelter. Manson saw himself as a messiah. His following grew as he drugged and intimately violated female followers. He also exploited them to recruit male followers. Manson manipulated young female followers by discouraging them from free thinking and threatening violence if they did not comply. Then on August 9th, 1969, an 8-month pregnant Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, Abigail Fogler, Wojciech Frykowski, and Stephen Parent were brutally executed by Manson family members. The members used Tate's blood to write "pig" on the front door. In 1971, he was then sentenced to life in prison. Number 2, Children of God. Initially called Teens for Christ, Children of God was founded in 1968 by David Berg in California. Attracting young runaways and hippies, David preached a kind of worship that combined the ways of Jesus Christ with the free love movement of the 60s. Members, who amounted to 15,000 people across the world at its peak, didn't work or go to school. The Children of God didn't believe in the nuclear family, so children were grouped together and lived separately from their parents. In the late 1970s, Children of God became notorious for the intimate practices that one of David's own daughters later described as religious prostitution. David coined the term flirty fishing, an intimate practice in which women would allegedly have intercourse with men to bring them into the cult. As he manipulated the Children of God family with his sadistic practices, members started leaving the community, including the family of actor Joaquin Phoenix, who grew up in a Children of God commune. Although David passed away in 1994 while under FBI investigation, the Children of God cult continues to exist and now goes by the name Family International. Although the group claims that the horrific practices are a thing of the past, you can watch the whole documentary called Children of God on Netflix. Now coming in at number 1, People's Temple. Jim Jones started his own congregation known as the People's Temple of the Disciplines of Christ in 1955. He proclaimed to have a vision of nuclear attack and when it would occur, causing him to move his church from Indianapolis to San Francisco. What many people didn't know is that Jones was said to have been using speed and intimately, physically, and emotionally abusing temple members. This kind of media coverage prompted Jones to convince about 1,000 of his followers to move away to Jonestown. Jonestown was a tactic to isolate followers and gain complete control, and it became a prison camp. Followers were publicly beaten, put into solitary confinement, and even put down with sedatives. On November 18, 1978, Jones was mad when he heard some members wanted to return to the States with California Congressman Leo Ryan. As Ryan was on his plane waiting to fly back to the States, he was executed as an order by Jones. Later that day, Jones ordered everyone to the pavilion. He urged everyone to drink a grape-flavored aid mixed with cyanide, tranquilizers, and sedatives. People were pressured into drinking it in fear of being shot. Those who didn't want to drink it were forcefully injected with poison. Jones was found with what was believed to be self-inflicted gunshot wound in his head, following the mass of the people that all drank the grape drink and took their lives. The Jonestown Massacre is known as one of the largest mass passings in American history, with a total of over 900 passings. And that was the top 10 scary cult practices from history. Thank you for watching this video. Let us know what you thought about it in the comments below, and we will see you next time.